Alright, so it's going to be an information dump today while we look at color theory. Um, Hopefully some of this is review, but um, as we move into color, these are just things that I want you to keep on your mind as we go. So, I do have this book up at school. If you're in school and you want to check it out, I think there's another one book about color too. Um, but we'll just dig right in. So, first of all, um, I know everybody's colored stuff before, and it's just like, oh, I want to color this, I'll use this color, and so on. In drawing, as we're using color, I want you to really think about your use of color and try to have some intentionality behind it, not just like, oh, I got to color this picture, it's red. Um, and that's kind of what we're going to be looking at is some more larger concepts related to color, and we're going to do a lot of this, and I'm going to really be focusing on value because I know the whole first semester we did colors in black and white focused on value. Well, as we move into color, um, value is not just out the door. Value is a very important part of using color. So we're going to be looking at a lot of examples of that here. So first off, we have the color wheel. Um, there are a couple different varieties of the color wheel. I'll kind of show off a different one at the end after we look through this book as to not blow your minds just yet, um, because my mind didn't get blown as far as color goes until I think I was a junior in college and took color theory. So we have our basic color wheel. We have now, surely we know the primaries, red, yellow, blue. But if you look at the color wheel like a chart, which I know that sounds disgusting, look, what do red and yellow make? Well, it's right between them. It's orange. Um, what do red and blue make? It's right between them. It's violet. And depending on how much you mix of each color, you can get these tertiary colors, the blue violet, red violet. Um, but this 12-step wheel, this is probably what all of you have used up until this point, which we're not abandoning it, but I am going to show you a second option um, as we go. So, if you've ever had another class with me before, I've probably yelled and yelled and yelled. Okay, not really, I don't yell, but complementary colors. This is one of the most basic tenets of color theory, and that's just colors that are straight across from each other on the color wheel. So red, you go straight across, is green, Christmas colors. You do um, blue violet, yellow orange. Um, if you had me for foundations, I probably had you mix these up with paint. We're not going to start with paint, but you can mix these with the colored pencils that we're going to be using. And we'll kind of talk about why kind of as we go farther. Now, we have hue, saturation, and value, and these are words to describe the color. And it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Hue is just like that basic idea of a color. So if you thought of the color red, that is the hue, that is red. Saturation is how bright that color is. So if it is like a really bright or like neon version of that color, it has a high saturation. And then value, how light or dark it is. Speaking of value, this is one of the things that I really want you guys to kind of take away from this video, because I'm going to kind of be showing you this as we go throughout um, us looking at this book. So you'll see we have our value scale here, we have light, we have midtones, we have blacks. Well, colors have these values regardless of if they're gray or if it's yellow. And the best way to kind of look at that is to take a color or take a photo on your cell phone and then kick it down to black and white. So, um, you can see here, this is white. This is one of the lighter colors, which is yellow. Then this yellow-orange is a little bit darker. And then we have this red and blue and blue-green are sort of this middle tone. Then we have red, and then we have some purples, a brown, and a green right here. So even without um, having any color, we have this value shift, and that's something that I really want you guys to kind of focus on, because it's going to make your work much more interesting if you aren't just trying to color it, but you're trying to color it kind of building on what we've talked about with value. Now, here is another example of this, and I'll show you guys why I feel like it's so helpful to look at images in black and white and in color, because you can really see, like, hey, all this is light, this is the lightest color, yellow, and then it's almost like a value scale, like it gets darker and darker and darker and darker and darker. And then, like, guys, these are all really dark colors. Now, this is like the regular, like, color wheel of hues right in this area here. Um, but you can see, even with that being said, um, we have some tones happening here where, or the shades where they're adding black. Now, since we're not painting, we're not really going to be talking about this tints, tones, and shades so much. Um, but that's just if you're mixing black, white, or gray with them. Let's see. All right, so more work on color and value. And guess what? I have another picture. So, in looking at these apples right here, you can see that these are all painted different colors. They don't look wildly different in black and white. Now, some of the values are changed. Like this, it has a really light section on this side. This one's also pretty light, but they have like pretty heavy darks on these too. So you can kind of see the way that looks and kind of how interesting that makes those other areas. This is, don't have a lot to add here, but accurate values and feisty colors. That's something. So you can see the same image playing with color a lot of different ways. A lot of really bright colors, minimal color palette here, more realistic here. And then, yeah, this is just kind of a really cool way to show you, like, hey, the colors you choose to use can really change up your piece. All right, color temperature and color relativity. Um, so probably heard of the warm and the cool colors. Now, I wouldn't so much call them color schemes. They can be color schemes, but you're kind of getting more into like analogous territory if you're using similar colors that are next to each other. But here is a really kind of good way of showing how these colors can be used. Um, Kind of one thing that is sort of like a rule of color is if you want something, if you're trying to show distance, we have warm colors in the front, and then the cool colors are in the back, and that kind of helps show distance. Um, Color relativity. Um, this is one of the things that really kind of blew my mind when I was taking color theory, and that's just what do the colors that you're using next to each other, how do they affect each other? So, um, I also put this in black and white just because that helps me, because I just think in value. Um, so, a color's temperature is influenced by the surrounding color. Um, this pink kind of seems cooler when set against this orange, this really bright, warm color. Um, when that is generally like a warm color. Um, and then you can also see like how having this dark value around it kind of tones it down a little bit, whereas having like this light value um, kind of makes it brighter, but it also makes it seem darker. So these value shifts of the dark with the light and the light with this one appearing darker, and you can see that here, um, that can really make a big difference as far as what colors you're choosing to place next to each other. Then we have relative chroma. Um, so these are like different um, chroma chromas of green. So really bright green makes this look dark. Dark green makes this look light. But all these, this is all the same color in the middle. But um, it's a lot. It's just thinking about how can you make a color appear warmer, place a cooler color next to it. How do you make it lighter? Place a darker color next to it. And how do you make a color brighter? Place a duller color adjacent to it. All right, so now we're going to look at color schemes. Now, just like before, you may be like, ugh, again. But color schemes are a great way to help you decide which colors to use because they're sort of like a tried and true way of being like, oh, what colors are good to use? Pick a color scheme and roll with it. Um, and it's not, um, and we'll talk about kind of how you can even expand that further. So, first we have monochromatic. Mono means one, chroma means color, one color. Now, just because it's one color doesn't mean that this person just used purple. There, if you're using a color scheme, you're able to use any variation of value. So you can see here we have light purples, dark purples, um, kind of medium purples, um, kind of like a grayed out purple, or kind of a neutral purple. Um, you get to use any of those colors that you want. Now, if you look really closely here, you'll see that these two stoplights are yellow, and this building kind of has a yellowish tint. Now, just because um, you're using a monochromatic color scheme does not mean that you can't use any other colors. That just means that the bulk of your piece is only focusing on the values of one color. Um, the use of some yellow right here, really nice for detail, because then we're getting into complementary territory over here. Analogous colors are colors that are right next to each other on the color wheel. So like it or not, reading the color wheel like a chart is kind of what you got to do for color schemes. Colors that are next to each other, they don't really, it kind of provides a lot of unity because they're all similar. They're all visually similar, um, but you're still getting some pretty good contrast. So usually analogous are like 3 to 4 colors right next to each other. Um, but here, we have this like yellow orange, and we also have a purple, which are pretty close to being complements. Or actually, that's more of a just a regular orange. But lighten it up, you get some yellows. You can still get some nice visual contrast with that. We have triadic color scheme, which are colors spaced evenly apart on the color wheel. Um, and this just kind of helps you provide some color balance. It's good if you kind of roll with one of these colors and then you have the other two for like details. But that really gets you like a wide array of colors to use. Now, complementary. Broken record over here. Complementary colors, colors straight across from each other on the color wheel. You can use any value of said colors. All right. Now, I had to stop it. So if I already said some of this about complementary colors, apologies. Um, complementary colors create such a contrast because if you look at um, where they are on the color wheel, which, yes, they're opposite from each other on the color wheel, but what that means is they have literally nothing in common. So your primaries are red, blue, and yellow, purple, red and blue. Then we have yellow over here. They have nothing in common. Um, and regardless which one you switch around to, if you did even the tertiaries, they're not going to have anything in common. And that's why they bring such contrast. Um, it does make it very bold in the contrast. You're also able to use any of those values. So light yellows, dark purples, um, kind of everything in between. Now, there's something else about complementary colors that we'll talk about in just a second. But first, I want to point out one thing, and that is looking at these 4 examples, there is almost no solid black being used. Generally, in paintings, black is most painters try to stay away from using black unless they're just mixing some of it with a color. Um, if you ever look at classic works, you'll and you kind of analyze them like that, you'll realize that there aren't a ton of painters that use just straight black. That's not to say that you shouldn't. Um, there's a place for it, and we do have a lot of really dark areas here, but none of them are just straight black. They're really dark values of purple. So just kind of be aware of that you kind of want to limit how much black you use when you're using color. Oh, so we've got some other color schemes that we're going to look at, but I want to point out one other thing about complementary colors. So this is a fairly crude depiction of a color wheel. So, we have green and red are complements, orange and blue are complements, violet and yellow are complements. Well, whenever you mix complements together, they neutralize each other. Since they don't have anything in common, they kind of make all these different neutral colors right here. Now, that's not to say that um, this isn't blue, it's just more of a neutral blue. But you can get really nice grays, nice browns. That's how if you've ever like mixed paint and you ended up with just this kind of goopy brown mess, that's because you're mixing at least one of each of the primary colors together, which essentially means you're mixing complements, because a complement's going to be one. So it'd be red, complements green, which green is yellow and blue. So if you're mixing all the primaries together, you get some sort of a muddy green. Now, you can see here, I'm still pulling this back out where I'm showing you how even these neutral values, um, they're not necessarily, it's not like oh, you mix them and it lightens up or it darkens. No, they just sort of neutralize the tones. And the same thing about all these neutrals here that you can get by mixing up just the colors. There's no black or white being mixed with this. Um, there might be on those in the middle, but if you are using a complementary color scheme, you're welcome to use all these purples, all these yellows, but then you can also mix purple and yellow together and you can use any of those colors. Now, there's one other trick with complements that I will show you in the demonstration with the Prismacolors, that whenever you're mixing, or whenever you are trying to shade using color, and it goes the same with paint, but we're going to be talking colored pencils because it is drawing class. If you're trying to darken up some yellow, you don't just have to use black. You can mix in the complement or a similar color, and you can darken it up that way too. But what's really nice is if you are mixing a little bit of violet in your um, yellow to try to darken that yellow up, it's going to neutralize it, which is going to make the shadows appear more realistic. And we'll kind of look at that when we get there, but I kind of wanted to point that out while we're looking at complements. So we have a split complementary where instead of doing the color and the color straight across from it, you do the two colors next to it. Not quite the same level of contrast, but still a lot of contrast because they're still not really sharing any of the color properties with the red, but you're getting more blues and you're getting more yellows, so a little bit more variety with the split complementary color scheme. Now, analogous complementary, that's not like one of the go-tos, but um, that's kind of like the split complementary, except for it's kind of opening it up a little bit more to use all of those colors. Not going to necessarily talk about tetrads so much, um, because that can be called a lot of different things, but it's just two groups of complements that are used together. Then we have the saturated one, And the saturation is just this brightest version of each color is what's being used on here. Very few neutrals or grays, just very bright, vibrant colors. We have this neutral, which not specifically like a color scheme, but you can see it's just the neutrals being used here. And then this is a saturated and neutral. These are sort of a little extra, but still good examples. You can see all of, but usually when I talk about, or as we're discussing not using black and looking at like classic paintings, this is a really good example because we have all these neutrals making up the backgrounds, making up the shadows. No black, just these neutrals. All right, and I think that is all that we're going to be talking about with this. There's some nice color mixing on here, but it is not, I don't know, it's a little bit different with colored pencils, but we'll kind of look at just like how you can go about layering up the Prismacolors, which is what we're going to be using. But yeah, so that is a massive information dump over color theory. And oh, it's not over yet. Get excited. So this is my book from my color theory class that I had when I was in college. It blew my mind, so I have kept it within an arm's reach in my studio. So we have our hue, value, and chroma chart. So we have hue, which is just that purest form of color. We have the value, and we have the chroma. So anything from gray to the bright color. Now, if you look at this color wheel, you'll realize that this is not a normal color wheel. We only have 10 colors, and for the purposes here, we do not have this yellow orange or this red orange. We just have orange. Now, what's really interesting about this is that as we're talking about complementary colors and creating maximum contrast, it's really important that you're using the true complement. Now, one of the ways to do this, if you stare at something that's one color for a long time, just focus on it, focus on it, focus on it, stare at it for a while, close your eyes, turn around, look to a white wall. That after image that kind of gets burned into your eye for just a minute there, that is the true complementary color of whatever color it is. So if you're going to be real particular about it, what you can do is you'll stare at the red, you'll look away, and you'll try to get this blue-green as its true complement. This is good showing the value. I did this by turning the pictures black and white on my phone, just kind of like I was showing you guys. But yeah, so there are different color wheels. I like the Munsell color wheel because it does kind of really reinforce this true complementary color, which this does kind of throw off a lot of these where orange and blue green are complements, red, or nope, that's orange and blue, then red and blue green, and the time's up. So to be continued.